Thursday, December 21st. I'm your host, Sarah Beal. On today's show, we talk with Town Council President Eric Steinhilber about tonight's Town Council meeting, and then State Senator Julian Cyr recently stopped by with his colleague, Senator Will Brownsberger, the chair of the Joint Committee on the Judiciary, to talk about the Criminal Justice Reform Bill. And then finally, we'll talk with Housing Coordinator Arden Cadron about the Hyannis First-Time Homebuyer Program. But first, let's get a look at today's top headlines. The Barnstable School Committee has an opening for a 4-year term for one seat. According to the town charter, there is a 30-day window of opportunity to fill this position. Anyone interested should reach out to the school committee or to your own town councilor to express interest. Finance Director Mark Milne has prepared the town of Barnstable's 10-year financial forecast. It is available to be viewed on the town's website. Long-term financial forecasting allows the town to consider its financial future beyond the current fiscal year. The focus of the 10-year forecast is concentrated on the trends illustrated over the past 10 years and how those may be replicated over the next 10 years. This report can also be connected to the town's other planning documents, such as the annual operating budget, capital improvement plan, and the town council's strategic plan. You may view the 10-year financial forecast on the town's website, townofbarnstable.us. The DPW Snow and Ice brochure is now available on the town's website and right here at Town Hall. The brochure gives you all the information you need on how the DPW operates during a snow and ice event. It also gives you tips on how you can help make their job easier. Pick one up today or view it on the town website at townofbarnstable.us. As part of the holiday tradition, the Hyannis Youth and Community Center's Giving Tree is the focal point in the main lobby during the month of December. Donations of gently used coats, mittens, as well as new hats will be accepted until December 31st. All donations will benefit Cape Cod Child Development. The Marine Environmental Affairs Division would like to remind everyone that renewal season is right around the corner. All mailings will be sent out by the new year and must be returned by their due dates. Any questions or concerns, please contact the MEA office at 508-790-6273. Up next, we talk with Town Council President Eric Steinhilber. Eric, thank you so much for joining us today. The last Town Council meeting of 2017 is happening tonight at 7 o'clock, and you have a fairly light agenda, but you are going to have an update from Senator Julian Cyr is going to be there this evening. What's he planning on talking to you about?
Yeah, he's just come in and give us a brief update on some things that are going on legislatively up in the State House. I've also asked former town councilor Will Crocker, who's obviously the state representative, to come back, periodically next year as well to also give us a brief update. I think it's important for not only the council but the public and Barnstable to at least be aware of some of the bigger things that are making their way through committees and through both chambers of the State House.
Yeah, it's definitely a great idea. I also have both of them as guests here on Barnstable Today, trying to keep the residents informed on what they're working on because they're up in Boston working for us, while you're
Absolutely.
here in town working for us here. So I think that's great. So I know he's got a lot on his plate, so I'm glad to hear that he's going to stop by and give you guys an update. Moving into the orders of the day, there's not a whole lot on the agenda tonight. Under old business is going to be the intermunicipal agreement between Barnstable Sandwich and Mashpee for Popponesset Bay, and this is going to be acted upon.
Yeah, this meeting every year typically tends to be a light agenda, but that is one of the items tonight, and we had a first read on it at the last meeting, and basically what this item is, as some people may know, Barnstable has 6 watersheds, and 4 of them are shared with other towns. And on one side of town, we have obviously Mashpee and Sandwich, and this agreement basically sets up a framework. I believe it's a 25-year agreement that we would set up the framework how we would go about applying for joint watershed permits under the 208 plan, which is a water management plan that's been kind of worked in conjunction with the state and the Cape Cod Commission. So this sets up the framework how we will go forward applying for these joint permits as we, whether it's dredging or sewering or other alternative methods, how do we address and how do we improve quality in the shared watershed.
I think it's important for all of the towns that share that water to be on the same page, because you don't want everyone to be doing their own separate thing when you guys can be pooling your resources and working together to protect these waters. So I think that's a really wonderful thing.
Right, and in the past, that's how it was. Everyone was doing their own thing.
Right.
But now, there's quite a bit of shared conversation, and there'll be a lot of joint work going forward. We also speak with Yarmouth, regularly. Town Manager Ellis has a regular meeting with the management at Yarmouth as well. So, we obviously share a watershed with them as well. So that I would expect that would be, coming down the pike relatively soon as well.
Wonderful. Under new business is the resolve for the Barnstable Hyannis Fire District intermunicipal dispatch agreement. I talked to the chief about this. This is going to be the Barnstable Police Department taking on dispatching duties for the Hyannis Fire Department.
Yeah, this is a great thing for Barnstable. The Barnstable Police Department was recently designated kind of this emergency call center. Previously, 911 calls would be routed through, I believe it's the state police up in, I want to say Taunton, but I know it was off Cape, and then it would be routed back to Barnstable. So there's obviously time involved in that. So now the 911 calls will come directly into the Barnstable Police Department, which really helps with response time here locally, makes it more efficient. And this particular agreement, I believe, will be for 15 years, but it's a joint agreement between the Hyannis Fire Department and the Barnstable Police Department, where the fire calls will be, will come into that communications center, which will be housed in the Barnstable Police Department.
Yeah, it's a really great idea to kind of streamline things and have it all in one location. And I know that as part of that, it'll be 3 more dispatchers coming on, so there'll be 12 new dispatchers all together with this new dispatch center. And it's just, it's just a wonderful way to make sure that our residents continue to be safe and have the best quality care that they can get in the case of an emergency.
Absolutely, and the center's been equipped with state-of-the-art equipment now. We've done upgrades. That's money that we've already earmarked previously, and then, like you said, bringing the extra staffing on board. So the top of the line, state-of-the-art communication center. So we're really happy to have that here in Barnstable.
Great. Eric, is there anything else you'd like our viewers to be aware of before I let you go today?
Well, tonight we're also going to be having some appointments and reappointments to boards and committees. That appointments committee met last Tuesday night, and that was a late add to the agenda. But that will also be, we'll be reading those in tonight as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Eric, for all your hard work. Congratulations on becoming Town Council President again for your 2nd term, and I look forward to chatting with you again next year.
All right. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas and happy holidays.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. My guest today is Eric Steinhilber. He's the Town Council President here in the town of Barnstable. Coming up, Housing Coordinator Arden Kedron, but first, State Senator Julian Cyr. Thank you both so much for joining us today. We're going to talk about the criminal justice reform bill. It's gone through the House, it's gone through the Senate, and let's kind of talk about where it is now and where it's going. So, Julian, you want to start?
Thank you, Sarah. It's glad to be with you.
Thank you.
And glad to have my colleague, Senator Will Brownsberger, who in the Senate is the chair of our Judiciary Committee, and has really been the lead thinker in the body in looking at criminal justice reform, a whole host of issues in criminal justice reform. This is something that the Senate and the House have been working on for quite some time, but really I think in the past year having a really deliberative process in trying to come up with a balanced approach around how do you make sure that we're doing the best we can by folks who are involved in our criminal justice system, both across that.
So the people working in it and the people that are affected by it.
Of course, which is many folks. But really glad to have Will Brownsberger here today, who's been the lead on this. This is an effort that has been bipartisan, in the Senate, especially in the House, a strong effort. But we'll turn it over to my colleague, Senator Brownsberger, to describe the process that we took to get here.
Wonderful.
Well, it's really been something that's been going on for a long time, many years really. There's been a deep conversation about the need for criminal justice reform, the need to lift people up instead of locking them up, the need to, when people have made mistakes and gotten involved in the system, we need to cut the chains that hold them down when they're trying to get back up on their feet. And at the same time, we need to keep in mind the needs of victims and the concern for public safety. And so that's a deep conversation. We've been having it for a number of years. We've been having it more intensely really over the last 2 or 3 years. We've had a very public process that with the Council of State Governments consulting, and then we've gone through a lot of hearings and developed a package of measures that I think are really on the cusp of getting done now. As you said, the House has done it, the Senate's done it, and we are about to embark on that conference process of reconciling the differences. I think we've got bills that are not too far apart, that kind of at least talk about the same things. And I'm very hopeful that we'll work through the differences and get something across the governor's desk sometime early next year.
That's wonderful. I know I've been talking to our state representatives about this for the past couple of months, so it's nice to see that everybody's working together to get this bill moved forward. I think it's great to see that the state is taking that, because I know it's a nationwide conversation, criminal justice reform, so I know that it's really important. I know one of the aspects of it that you guys have been working on is the mandatory minimums. Would you like to address that a little bit, and where we are with that and how that's looking as a piece of it?
Sure. Mandatory minimums is actually one of those things that people focus on most, as you say. It's sort of the top of most people's list, both from both sides of the equation, from both sides of the conversation. I actually think of it as just one of a number of things we do in this bill that are all important. What we do in this bill is we look at the drug business as kind of on 3 levels. You know, you've got like any other business, you've got your customers. We call them users, usually when we talk about drugs. You've got your retailers, your storefronts. I think we talk about dealers when we talk about drugs. And then we got your wholesalers, your traffickers. In this bill, we actually strengthen the mandatory minimum penalties for trafficking, and we address the issue of fentanyl. We don't have it on our books today, any mandatory minimum for fentanyl, which is really kind of taking the place of heroin in a lot of the markets of the state. Acts a lot like heroin, but it's even more potent, and there's flavors of fentanyl that are even more potent, still carfentanil. And so we don't have mandatory minimums in place for those. We're going to treat those just the same way we treat heroin once we pass this bill, which is, in fact, we have very significant mandatory minimums for that, for trafficking in those drugs. Where we back off is for the retailers, the lower level person, seller, not the one who's just selling directly to the user, very likely to be a user themselves, or in any case, a kid with an issue that needs to be turned in a different direction, who's not gone too far into the business. And so that's where we back off on mandatory minimums in this bill.
I think the opiate epidemic really has reframed how a lot of us, certainly in the legislature, also those in law enforcement, judges as well, really look at, what's the best way to really address drug abuse and folks who are participating in those systems. I think of, and I've been really made an effort to sit down with chiefs of police across Cape Cod, and one quote that really stuck with me was from the deputy chief here in Barnstable, is that, we can't lock our way out of this problem when it comes to the opiate epidemic. And so I think part of criminal justice reform has been a real reframing in how do we think about that? How do you work to make sure that more people get into treatment? And then a whole host of other issues. I think one thing that I know Senator Brownsberger has worked really carefully on is looking at bail reform. And how do we make sure that folks are just not being held because they can't scrounge together those resources? On the other hand, if someone who is actually a real danger to either themselves or to someone else, then we should have processes to make sure that those folks are held. So just one of a myriad of sort of issues that are there. But I think really the opiate epidemic, and here we remain having some of the highest rates of opiate overdose, both leading to death and reversal right here in Barnstable County.
It's a real issue across the state, but like you said, definitely here in Barnstable County. So the next part is going to be reconciling the two versions between the House and the Senate before you bring it to the Senator, and you said that they're pretty close, and you're looking for January to maybe get it to the governor.
I think I said early next year.
Oh, early next year. Sorry.
I was a little bit softer than that.
Yeah.
I definitely would love it to be January.
Yeah.
And the good thing is, I think those of us who are involved have the appetite and the availability to really work through the holidays, and we'll really get started next week.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful. But that's it. There's a lot of details in this that we just really need to work through carefully.
Yeah.
It's not. It's partly about reconciling the differences and okay, you did this, we did that. Let's do something in between.
Right.
But it's also about just making sure that we get it right. That what we put on paper ultimately and put in the books is something that's going to work. It doesn't have unintended consequences.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for all your hard work. I know this is a huge undertaking. It's something that I know hasn't been really looked at in a really long time, and I know how important it is. I know how important it is here to the residents of Barnstable and the residents of Cape Cod. So I appreciate both of your hard work on this, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us in, Sarah.
Thank you. My guests today are Senator Julian Cyr of Cape Cod and Will Brownsberger of Belmont. Arden, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to talk about the Hyannis Homebuyer Assistance Program, which I know started a couple months ago. Let's start with, where did the idea for this program come from, and how did that, get started?
Well, we're using our community development block grant funds for this program, and affordable housing is one of the prime initiatives of that program. And we decided to start with the village of Hyannis because it right now has a larger percentage of rentals versus the other 7 villages, the other 6 villages. And we're trying to promote homeownership, and we're trying to promote some neighborhood stabilization, which homeownership does help to achieve. So we decided to focus in Hyannis. There's also limited availability of funds, so it helps to sort of target a particular area. And this is a trial. We'll start with Hyannis, and we hope to expand it to the other villages as well.
Wonderful. Now, what exactly are the community development block grant funds for anyone who's not sure what that is?
Sure. So that's CDBG funds. They're federal funds that the town receives. We're an entitlement community, so every year we get an allocation of funds from the federal government, from HUD. Many people have heard of HUD. And then there are some available uses, some allowable uses with those funds. And this year we decided to start this program.
Wonderful. Well, this is a great use of those funds.
It
so,
is.
I mean, that's, but there's a lot of little intricacies that go on with this program. So let's kind of start with what exactly the program is.
Right. So the program is financial assistance to income eligible first-time home buyers. So income eligible has a financial number attached to that. You have to be less than 80% of the median income depending on your household size. And then you need to be a first-time home buyer. There are some caveats to that, which we can explain to you if people contact the office. And you need to be eligible to receive a first mortgage from a local lender. So this program assists you in filling that gap between what you can afford to borrow and what the prices are on the market, because as everybody knows, these prices are just increasing constantly. There's really not much available out there for somebody at 80% of the median, so we're giving you a little more buying power. And it's in the form of a second mortgage, so it is a lien against your property, but there's 0 interest and there's no payments required during the time that you own the house. You would only pay the funds back when you sell the house. And at that point, hopefully you'll have built some equity in the house and be able to pay those funds back.
Right. So you're looking for buyers that can already get approved for that first mortgage. And you could almost look at this $75,000 as you take the total amount of the house that you're looking at and be like, okay, what we would end up paying would be $75,000 less.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, you're getting a no payment $75,000 loan, which is fabulous. It helps you to have more stability in that house. You're not reaching beyond your means. You're not spending more of your monthly income on housing than is really practical or safe.
Yeah.
So that's what this $75,000 does. So for example, if you're pre-approved, we'll use simple round numbers. If you're pre-approved, you've gone to a bank, they've looked at your numbers, your income, you're pre-approved for about $200,000, you can now look for a house for $275,000 because this these funds will help assist you with that purchase.
And that's a really large, help. I recently bought a home about 4 years ago, and it's the market is very difficult out there. You have to be really keen to be looking at what you're getting versus where you are, and there's so many parts of it that to be able to look at that house that you might not normally have been able to look at,
exactly,
that's just out of your range, or that 70, that's going to be a huge help to so many people if they can get
Absolutely.
that first mortgage.
If they can get that first mortgage, and we're hoping that it also helps you to buy a house that doesn't need a tremendous amount of work, because that's a challenge as well. You might be able to find something on the market, but you need to have a lot of cash in the bank to be able to make these repairs on the house. So we're hoping it also helps you to purchase something that's in a little better shape, so that it's not going to be a burden on you once you own it, and continue to use a lot of your income towards repairs.
That's wonderful.
So, and as a reminder, it does need to be within the village of Hyannis. So the map for the village of Hyannis, we're using the fire district map. We have that map available for anybody who's interested if they're looking at a property and need to know if it's within the village. But that is another criteria. And at this point, only single-family homes are eligible. Condominiums are not eligible. We're trying to get families into neighborhoods and people into neighborhoods.
Wonderful. Now, how is the payback process, the $75,000?
Well, if in a number of years, the average person, believe it or not, only owns a home for 7 years. I think when you buy your house, you think you're not going to fall in that statistic, but it happens. For whatever reason, hopefully for good reasons, your income has increased or your family size has increased. So when you sell that house, you have to just remember that 75% of that is going to come back to the town. So there's a mortgage on your property, so at closing, it will be clear to all the attorneys involved that $75,000 of that equity does need to come back to the town. I don't expect to be receiving any funds back soon, but when they do come back, we can reprogram those funds.
That's wonderful. That's a great way to kind of build that continuing of the program by having that money come back in that way. Whether you live in the house for 5 years, 25 years, 35 years, the town will get that money back and can continue the program, hopefully.
Absolutely. It's a different method of assisting people at income eligibility. Often it's done with a deed restriction, but deed restrictions limit the amount of equity that you can build and the amount of funds that you can get back. And it's so there's two different methods. And we're choosing this route this time to see how if it's more effective in assisting people to get into homeownership.
Wonderful. Well, hopefully you'll get some great candidates that come in that are ready to move forward with the first mortgage, so they can get the second mortgage, and then they can find a wonderful house in Hyannis. I live in Hyannis and I absolutely love it. So there's nothing wrong with living in Hyannis. It's a great village.
It is.
It's a great community.
Hyannis has a lot of potential, and the town is focusing a lot of our planning efforts in Hyannis, and I agree. It's I think only a great place to live. So for those people who might be interested, they can contact the Planning and Development Department. There's applications online that they can fill out online and bring them in. We'd be happy to meet with anybody if they have an application ready and help walk them through that process.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming in, telling us all about this great Hyannis Homebuyer Assistance Program, and I can't wait to hear about some success stories that you have coming up in the next year or so.
Great, thanks for having me. I look forward to coming back and sharing those stories.
Wonderful. My guest today is Arden Cadron. She's the Housing Coordinator in the Planning and Development Department. Town Council meets tonight at 7 p.m. in the Town Hall Hearing Room. That meeting will air live right here on Channel 18. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be back tomorrow with an all-new show. On tomorrow's show, we'll talk with Assistant Recreation Director John Gleason, and we'll also chat with Natural Resource Officer Sean Cordes. For Barnstable Today, I'm Sarah Beal.